when life breaks us, we either break down and move into ourselves and become angry and embittered and shut off from the world, or we break open.
Every story has a turning point, the moment when everything shifts. Here on Hope Comes to Visit, we hold space for those moments, the messy middles, the sacred breakthroughs, and the quiet strength that carries us forward. I'm Danielle Elliott-Smith. Thank you so much for being here with us on Hope Comes to Visit. My guest today is someone I have known for quite some time, and she has a beautiful story of hope and inspiration. Kim Moldofsky is the bold belief builder at Scrappy Affirmations, which offers soul-enriching workshops, transformative coaching, heartfelt rituals, and essential end-of-life planning to women in midlife and beyond. Known for creative gatherings, she creates welcoming spaces that foster openness, self-discovery, and the sharing of wisdom. Kim is a model of imperfection and is on a mission to help normalize what it means to be human in a complicated world. Let's take a quick moment to thank the people that support and sponsor the podcast. When life takes an unexpected turn, you deserve someone who will stand beside you. St. Louis attorney Chris Dully offers experienced one-on-one legal defense. Call 314-384-4000 or 314-DUI-HELP, or you can visit dullylawfirm.com. That's DULLE lawfirm.com for a free consultation. Kim, thank you so much for being here. When I was thinking about doing this podcast, you were truly one of the first people that came to mind, because I have watched you take your story and move through it with such grace and share it with people and do everything you can to say, how can I hold space for other people who are going through something similar, or don't be afraid of going through the hard things.
Thank you.
Yeah. Will you do me the honor of sharing a little bit of your background, your story with our listeners?
Sure. My background is basically I have built a career on chasing squirrels and have had a very wandering path. And in 2019, I was working for a family business, and I had decided I had started something called Scrappy Affirmations, which at the time was literally affirmations engraved on scraps of wood from this workshop that I had been, this innovation space that I had been a part of. And I decided I was going to actually build that out into more of a business. I was going to do programs that blended creative expression and self-reflection and scrap. And I love collage. I think collage is a very powerful process. So I love collage not just as an art form, but as a reflective process. I think it's magical, honestly. And so I was going to start doing these workshops, and I did start in the fall of 2019. And then in early January 2020, I had sort of a breakthrough, and that people I did not know had signed up for my workshops. And that was on January 19th. Well, at 1 a.m. on January 19th, I got a call saying that my son was brain dead of a self-inflicted wound, gunshot wound specifically. And that was the cleave that divided my life into a before and an after. And again, January 19th, kind of a key date, because January 20th was the first case of COVID diagnosed in the US. And wow. So my world was turned upside down, but then, 6 weeks later, everybody's world was turned upside down because of COVID. And so, yeah, so I felt like I I sort of had this 6-week jump on what it means to have your life change overnight. And for me, the shutdown, I was at this point where like people were starting to, friends were trying to bring me back out in the world, and then everything shut down. And for me as an introvert, that was actually gave me a lot of time and space to we talk about all the things that heal and journaling and time in nature and things like that. And those are all important. But we don't talk enough about the hours spent staring up at the ceiling or crying in the car. And that is something I think is important, that when we see, oh, look at Danielle, she's been through so much, she's so strong. And we're not seeing, although you do sometimes post videos of you cry where you are crying in your car, which I appreciate that transparency. I think, there's a lot that goes into healing that we don't see. And when, I feel weird being held up as any sort of model, honestly, or inspiration, I was just trying to get through like everybody else.
See, and I don't mean that when I say that. I don't mean to make it feel odd. And I think that one of the reasons that I find you inspiring is because you have been transparent about moving through a process.
Yeah.
One of the things that I fear about our society and grief is the hiding and the lack of vulnerability and our unwillingness to acknowledge that everyone should be allowed to grieve as it suits them.
Yeah.
I think that your process might be different than mine,
Sure.
and that's okay, right? I would love for us to, and I mean us collectively as a society, to say, take the time you need. Do what works for you. And to tell people, I mean, when you said that I posted videos of myself crying, I did. And I was astonished by the number of people who said, thank you. Because knowing that you are still crying after 6 weeks or 6 months has told me that it's okay that I still feel this way about my mom or my sister or my child.
Absolutely.
Because there is, for whatever reason, throughout history, we have shortened the period of time in which we are allowed to grieve. We only give people a handful of days off now and say, okay, are you done?
Right.
And people verbally say to each other, so are you not over it? Are you like, have you not moved on? Have you? And I don't find that to be appropriate. So I love that you talk about him. I love that you give people space to say, we can talk about death and dying. And you have found a way to transition your world around and through your experience that gives other people space to do the same.
Yeah, so thank you. In I want to say June or July of 2019, I had also started facilitating these conversations about death. I had started with a program called Death Over Dinner Jewish Edition that I got trained on. And Death Over Dinner is just exactly what it sounds like, bringing people together to talk about death over dinner or dessert or snacks or whatever, and just normalizing that conversation, because people do think about death and they have thoughts about grieving and loss, but we don't as a society. Here in America, we are horrible about creating space for that. And so just inviting people to sit around a table and have these conversations about death is so powerful. And it sounds like it would be really depressing, but there are tears, but there's also laughter, and there is just sort of a sense of relief of, oh, I'm not the only one who was wondering about this, or I'm not the only one who wanted to talk about this but didn't have an outlet for it. And so they wind up being very powerful conversations, because people would really turn off their phones and show up as their whole selves. And I think while my son's death was by no means easy, I think because I had started having these conversations months before, I was better prepared in some aspects. And we did name his death as a suicide. And that I did not realize how powerful that would be to other people. My thought is, why would we hide this? We're proud of who he was. And, it was not a great choice on his part. It was, really, it was devastating.
Of course.
But I didn't see when people were said, "Oh, you're so brave for, talking about the fact that it was a suicide." And I said, I already feel so horrible. I can't imagine layering shame on top of that or feeling like I was keeping a secret. And I think that you know how harmful it is to keep secrets. And I just think shame is the least productive emotion. So having vulnerable conversations, bringing things out into the open is so much better. We're all the better for it. And in fact, at his memorial service, it was my husband's family and my family both have deep roots in the area. There were like 600 people at the memorial service, and we did not do a receiving line. Thank goodness. I could not have handled that.
Art.
But we were sort of ushered into this very full sanctuary social hall for the memorial service. And the rabbi started off and said, "This was a suicide of a young person. How many of you have been touched by a suicide?" And of course, I couldn't crane my neck and look back.
Right.
But she knows what she's doing.
Right,
So
of course.
she said it was something like half or 2/3 of the people raised their hand. So again, suicide is something that is tragically, truly tragically common in our society, but
Absolutely.
it is, it is shushed, it is hidden away. And there were people that I didn't necessarily know that well that would come up and hug me, and there was something about the energy, or it was just like a little longer of a hug than I would have expected. And there was the sense of like, oh, this happened in your family, or you have been touched by this. And sure enough, like stories would come out of like, oh yeah, my uncle committed suicide or died by suicide. I do say committed suicide, but died by suicide is, preferred lingo these days, I guess. I had a relative who died by suicide, and we were not allowed to talk about it. And I have been living with this 20, 30, 40 years. And it was so powerful to hear you talk about this openly. The obituary that appeared in the newspaper did not mention suicide. And I didn't have anything to do with that. But I do remember feeling like a little irked because, again, I just didn't want this to be a shameful thing. This was a really bad choice, but it was his choice. He also became an organ donor. He saved 4 lives and
extraordinary.
helped others through tissue donation. And so it's all completely, the whole thing is completely devastating and yet also wrapped in love. And it's, if you haven't felt this, it's maybe a hard thing to imagine. And, it's so extreme. And our family was so wrapped in love and so cared for, but also completely devastated. I have, so the Jewish Death Over Dinner became Let's Eat Cookies and Talk About Death. And I recently branched out into a storytelling night called Stories of Life and Love. And when we're talking about life and love, we're also talking about grief and loss. And at the last, I just had a show just over a week ago. I saw that. Oh my gosh, it was so beautiful. And themes, well, I did try to intentionally build a theme based on the submissions I had from the storytellers, but there was definitely a theme about healing through grief, acknowledging grief so that we can heal. And we ended with a really beautiful story about a woman talking about her grandmother who had lost an adult son, about her grandmother basically keening at the son's grave and then stopping and noticing this beautiful flower nearby. And the storyteller reflected on the power of the fact that if she had not felt that grief, she would not have seen the beauty, that it was by letting that grief out that she could see the beauty.
See, that is so extraordinary to me because I have said, it makes me think of a couple of things. This podcast I've owned the domain to this podcast for over 5 years. Okay. And I've known, I wanted to do a podcast for years, but known that I was going to do this one for 5 and was in the process of working on getting it launched when Marty passed away. And I can remember making a sound, sitting on the floor and hearing a sound and thinking, who is making that noise?
Yes.
And only to realize that it was me. And the only way those noises ever came out of me was when I was alone, because the empath in me cannot do that in front of anyone else. Because when I see you reacting to me breaking down, I worry about you. Yeah. And I'm uncomfortable. And so, but I was making that noise and I thought, who is that? And then I thought, have I lost hope? I feel like I've lost hope. Where do I go from here? Am I done? Have I done everything I'm supposed to do? And in that moment, I thought, I'm supposed to do a podcast called Hope Comes to Visit. What a joke. And as I moved through, as I did the work, I went to a grief therapist and I went to a traditional therapist I'd known for years who knew my relationship with Marty, and the grief therapist didn't, right? So I was going to therapy twice a week. Yeah. And I was only spending time with people who could sit with me. I avoided anyone who acted as though my grief was too big for them or who wanted me to move on. Or I specifically avoided anyone who was toxic to me because I knew that I was having enough trouble living on my own. But as I was moving through that process, I recognized that had I not experienced that pain, I wouldn't be capable of doing this podcast because now I know what it looks like to be without hope. And so the flip side is, wow, hope. I always thought I knew hope, but I didn't.
Yeah.
And having felt that much loss, wow, love feels so much bigger now, right? Being able to experience the dichotomy of emotions makes the joy and the love and the acceptance and the beauty so much bigger. Yeah. If I didn't experience the hard, I wouldn't be able to see the good as well as I do.
Yeah. No, I think that makes perfect sense. And I had not the hope experience, but the sound experience that you described that I can only describe as keening, like just what, where you're making the sound and then having this awareness like, oh my gosh, like who is making that noise and where is this coming from? And, it comes from so deep within and is so honest and so raw. That I am familiar with. And I will say, I want to talk about one of the things that really helped me heal. Yes, therapy is definitely good, and having somebody who can explain grief to you, because we are such a grief illiterate society. And I will also say, when I do these discussions, gathering people around the table to talk about death, I have had numerous people who are 70, 80 years old that are still have this grief locked inside from then when they were a child and their grandparent or maybe even their parent or a favorite aunt or uncle died and they were not allowed to go to the funeral. They were told not to cry, so we come from a very like generations of grief illiteracy, and we all have a role in helping heal that. And part of that is having discussions like this. So one of the things that was really helpful to me was mindful self-compassion. And mindful self-compassion has three basic principles. One is that you talk to yourself the way your best friend would talk to you. And obviously with the suicide, there are a million what if, and looking back at, Congressman Jamie Raskin, whose son died by suicide about a year after Isaac did. He talked about this as emotional quicksand, that you just fall into a sinkhole. It's unproductive, not helpful. So the whole mindful self-compassion component of do not let yourself, do not go down that path, and do not say things in your own head that you would not allow a friend to, if a friend was saying this out loud, you would say, stop that. That's not right. That's not helpful. That's not right. Let's look at this from a different direction. So having that voice, and then also having community around you. I have my notes because I know there's three things I didn't want to forget. Just mindfulness and trying to ground in the present, and then also recognizing our humanity and that life is complicated, humans are complicated, and that we just need to accept all the different parts of ourselves and give ourselves grace. And a book that I found really helpful along those lines was a book called Broken Open by Elizabeth Lesser.
Okay.
Several people gave me books right after my son died. And honestly, I could not read anything longer than a tweet. And that's when they were only 280 characters. But like that was for a year. I mean, I normally read a couple dozen books a year, and I read, I think, 1.5 books that year, and the one book I had read before my son died. Like I just did not have that capacity. So all these
I didn't either. The only thing I could do was audiobooks occasionally, and I had to have something else happening at the same time because otherwise my thoughts would spiral.
Yeah. So somebody gave me this book, and it went with the other books that people had given me. Again, very thoughtful. I really appreciate it, but they were just, stuck in a corner. Then I heard Elizabeth Lesser on, I think probably Fresh Air with Terry Gross. And I was so intrigued. I went out and bought the book only later to realize that I had it sitting on a shelf. I cracked open the book, and I don't know if you've ever had this experience. I started reading it and I was like, wow, this is going to be a really powerful book for me. And I shut it and like put it away for 6 to 8 months. Like I couldn't. It was too relatable and like too full of wisdom. But eventually I did make it through it. It's one of these books where the chapters are really short. So it is good to read in a time when you don't necessarily have a long attention span. But that book was really helpful to me ultimately. And the premise of Broken Open is when life breaks us, we either break down and move into ourselves and become angry and embittered and shut off from the world, or we break open. And I think you and I are both examples of breaking open and saying like, hey, we're all in this together. And I think one of the things we learn in deep grief is how many people have been through this kind of situation, and we just didn't know until we've crossed that line ourselves. We're just not aware of it.
It's amazing who shows up, right? My therapist said to me, when something like this happens, everyone in your life is broken into 3 buckets.
Yeah.
People who show up for you, people who disappear entirely, and the people who try and kind of fail, right?
Yeah.
And the try and kind of fail are the how are you doing? And the everything happens for a reason, and gosh, you're so strong, and the like the occasional the attempts, but the oh, this is uncomfortable, I'm trying. But unfortunately, everybody's mixed around because the people who show up for you are people that you never thought would. And the people who disappear are the people you were sure were going to have your back. And it's gutting, right? You're like, where did my people go? I was shocked at some of the people who disappeared. Like my sponsor disappeared.
Oh my gosh, how painful.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, one of the things that she said to me at one point when I went to a meeting the day after Marty died, the day after his funeral, and then I tried to go the following week, and I didn't go the week after that. And she called and said, and I'd barely seen her. Like I didn't hear from her the week between him dying and the funeral. And she said, sorry, I've been such a bad sponsor. It's just been so hard to watch you and the family going through this. And I thought, what are you watching? Like you only know, like you're not close to the rest of his family, but okay. And then barely heard from her, called me after I went to didn't go to the one meeting. And I said, I can't go. When I go to the meetings, no one acknowledges me. And she said, oh, Danielle, I mean, it's just hard. People don't know what to say. And I said, you know what? It's my turn. Quite honestly, I show up for other people. I can't I said, I'm barely making it out of the house. I can't go somewhere that it isn't safe. I can't go to a room full of people who are going to pretend I'm not there because it's uncomfortable for them because my grief is too big.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm broken. I'm barely making it. So I'm sorry that's hard for everybody else. So
that is a lot. And I know we were exchanging messages around this time. And I remember I'm not a drinker and I'm not an imbiber or user of substances. I just that's not me. And I remember hearing a writer say this one time that was like, thank goodness I don't like alcohol because I would surely be an alcoholic by now. And so thankfully I was made in a way that doesn't make me tend to that. But I was really worried about you and your sobriety because I know that was a hard battle in the first place. And then to have all of this heaped on you is a lot. And I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. You know, I will say I was truly committed to staying sober. I didn't want to drink. My bigger fear was that I didn't want to be here. That was my and the people who were closest to me could sense that.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of tiptoeing around me, like, how do we help her? Like we can see the line she's walking. We can picture what's coming for her if we can just get her through this. Fortunately, I was surrounded by good people who were willing to sit in the dark with me and just kind of hold my hand and weren't running in to turn on the lights and trying to ship me off somewhere and say, like, we're going to make this better. And it's beautiful now to be surrounded by those same people who can say, oh, see, we knew it. It was coming.
Yeah.
And it feels good to be where I am now and knowing that I had to go through where I was to be where I am now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think your point about the people wanting to come in and turn on the lights, literally or metaphorically, that is, again, like, that's what we've learned about grief. Like, oh, Danielle's sad. We have to make her happy.
Right.
And not understanding that Danielle might need to be sad for a little while. Danielle might still need to be sad sometimes. I know early on, I went to a survivor of suicide loss meeting, and a woman had showed up to her first meeting. This just timing wise happened to be about 2 weeks after Isaac died. And there was a woman at this meeting. It was her first time going to a meeting, and her son had died 10 years earlier. And it just hit me. I mean, I was still in shock. I had a headache for like 3 weeks after he died that my therapist later said was, oh, you were just in shock. That was your body.
For sure. Your body was fighting.
Yeah. But just like listening to that woman say it had been 10 years and this was the first time she got the courage up to go to a meeting, like it just sort of hit me like, oh, this is a forever problem. Like this is, it's a forever problem, which is both, it can feel daunting, but it also can provide some relief in that there is no timeline for grief. We
Right.
discussed that. And so this is part of my life's work, and it is always going to be there. And sometimes it's going to bubble up and be very present and disruptive and painful. And sometimes it'll just be in the background. There's a book that came out a couple of years ago called The Grieving Brain. I want to say by Mary Frances O'Connor, but that might be wrong. I haven't read the book, but I've listened to a bunch of her TED Talks and interviews. Mm-hmm. And basically death, especially a sudden, unexpected, traumatic death, is a brain injury. And I think there's some relief to me in knowing that as well. Like, it is a traumatic brain injury. If you got a severe concussion or, a war wound or whatever, it would take years for your brain. A stroke, it can take years for your brain to recover. And
That's
while
so
when you're early in the grief process, that might not be comforting to hear. Oh, it's going to be 3 to 5 years before your brain is back to normal. At some point that was helpful, because I do feel like that 3 to 5 year timeline fit for me. And again, it's not that I'm over it, but I feel like it really took a few years for my brain to get going again.
I am right at 2 years in this next month, and I am doing okay. I've had a lot of my support system has had a lot to do with that.
Sure.
And is there anything that you would say that has been particularly healing for you, whether it is, and again, knowing that there isn't a timeline and there isn't oh, you're all better, right? I mean, there is I saw an illustration at one point that said, my grief will always be, pretend it's fist sized, and it's that my life grows around it, right? Like that grief doesn't get smaller, my life gets bigger around it. And so knowing that your loss of Isaac will always be the same size, your life continues to grow around it. Is there anything particular that has allowed you to grow more or heal more, whether it's work or something specific?
So I like that analogy. I talk about it as a book, not a fist, like a big, heavy book, and that occasionally falls off the bookshelf and lands on your toe, but your bookshelf fills up. Not original. I got that somewhere, but so knowing that it is ever present, and sometimes I might call upon it, and sometimes it's just going to land in my life, and accept that instead of fighting it. It's always going to be something to work through. It's never going to be something to stick in a closet, because it's just going to spring out and surprise me. But I think community, which you mentioned, so mindful self-compassion, community, and then I started exercising again, like COVID, the shutdown, like my dad was also really going downhill. It was 2020 was, I know it was bad for everyone. It was very complicated and very difficult. So I started exercising and getting for me, it's like aerobics. I think whatever is going to stick with you is the best exercise for a person, whether it's, intense or walking a mile or 5 every day. So exercise, but specifically something aerobic that gets my heart rate up. And I still do it like 3 to 5 days a week, I would say. And on the weeks where it's 3 or something happens and I just don't exercise for a few days, like I know that is a key part of my mental health, is making sure that I'm sweating it out a few times a week. And also making art and sharing art is key. And something that I started during the lockdown was because we weren't out communicating, I started making these signs that I put outside of my house. And in my mind, I mean, 2020 was such a shit year.
Right.
And then, yeah, like, there was so much bad stuff happening. And I wanted, like, part of me wanted to just make these really angry signs of like, F everything. But I also knew that was not the kind of energy I wanted to put out into the world. So instead, I would make these like scrappy affirmations, like, but in a lawn sign version. And I had a couple friends help me with an art installation called The Giving Tree, where we took the tree in front of my house. And you know how you sometimes see those strips of paper, like someone's offering a job or babysitting, and you tear off those strips of paper
Right.
with the phone number. So I had seen something like that, but it said, take what you need. And it was like compassion and love and all these nice things. And so we had this doodle paper left over from another friend, and we wrote like love and compassion and hugs and, all this stuff. And then we tied it with ribbons to the tree. And another friend of mine was doing this flower rescue where, like, if a store was getting rid of bouquets that were like decent, but not nice enough
Perfect.
to sell because they wouldn't last. She'd got me some bouquets. And so we had like flowers and these ribbons with these beautiful words hanging by and a sign that said, take what you need. And, it was really beautiful. And so this was like 2020, 2021. And then, a couple years later, when things were back to life and I was meeting some neighbors that have moved in during that time, there were a couple of people who said to me, oh, you're the woman who had the signs outside of your house. And I said, yeah. And they said how nice and how encouraging it was to see those when the world felt like it was falling apart. And to me, that was so powerful that it actually did. Somebody really was looking
did
at that.
a little bit of what you wanted. It's interesting because I had someone say something similar about the podcast last week. I had someone say, oh my gosh, like I was feeling hopeless and it was the worst day. And I listened and I felt my life isn't better, but I felt a little shred of hope. And I was talking to my son and I said, it wasn't validation, it was relief. Yeah. It was relief that this little bitty thing that I'm trying to do, what I hope will be hopeful for other people, because my hope is that someone will hear a little bit of your story and they will think, this is what I needed to hear. Or, oh, you know what? I need to stop what I'm listening to. I'm hearing Kim right now. And what she just said, my mom, my sister, my cousin, my best friend need to hear this right now. And they turn right around and they share it and they pass it on to someone else because they think, I know someone who's having this exact experience and this will resonate. And that's because the shared human experience, right? The idea that we're going through these things. I realized in going through my early stages of recovery, one of the most powerful things that was happening was hearing my story coming out of someone else's mouth and thinking, oh my God, you mean I'm not alone? You mean there are other people who are experiencing and feeling and thinking and hurting the same way I am? And they're making it awesome. It means I can too. Yeah. And I think that, early when I said that there's so much of you that inspires me, it's the making it piece, right? It's providing taillights for someone else. It's showing us that we can, because there are so many days where we think we can't. And there is a piece of your story, Kim, that losing your son the way you did, I know there are people who think, how would I do that? Yeah. And you have, and you're still going, and you're making such an incredible difference in other people's lives. And the symmetry in so many of the things that you were doing even before you lost Isaac, the Scrappy Affirmations making a difference for people, the fact that you were having conversations around death before you lost him, uniquely prepared you in the tiniest way possible to be able to have conversations around death and not to disappear and not to
Yeah.
say, I cannot talk about this, and
Yeah.
not to say I'm going to exist in shame and I'm going to hide his story.
Yeah.
And so much of that gives other people hope in ways that I believe we need.
Thank you. Yeah, there was something I was going to respond to and something you said just now, and I have lost the thought. Oh, just that, I think someone can look at your life like, oh, Danielle's doing this amazing podcast, or like Kim is doing these cool workshops, and don't necessarily know the backstory. But everybody has a backstory, right? Like it's
Right.
easy to look at people, especially on social media, and just see the shiny and the success, and to think, wow, they don't have any problems, like they've got it made. And that's not true for most people. For the vast majority of people, there is always more to the story, and that we need to show each other grace and kindness. Oh, I will also say that, a friend of mine said, wow, it's like the universe prepared you and for my son's death. And my response was like, well, fuck that. Like,
I did not,
no, thank
I had
you.
no intention of being
Right.
prepared. No, absolutely no, thank
Right.
you.
No, I don't really want any of this, nor do I recommend it. And I have a friend who used to often say, everything happens for a reason. And I said to her, please don't say that in front of me. That is so painful. But I heard an alternative of everything has meaning, or everything can have meaning. So like, no, I'm not going to say it happened for a reason, but, and this is something that came up at last week's story night, we can use our pain for a greater purpose. If we have the right support and the right backing, and maybe time and an outlet of grief, there's a lot that goes into it, but ultimately we can use our pain for a purpose, hopefully.
I fall somewhere in there because I do not believe everything happens for a reason. You will never convince me that my kids were supposed to have a mom who's an alcoholic, but there is a child out there who's supposed to lose both their parents, right? You just can't. You can't convince me that that you were supposed to lose Isaac. Like there's no meaning in that for me. I do believe that I was supposed to figure out what to do with the pain that showed up for me.
Yeah.
And that's a choice I get to make. What am I going to do with it? I can sit down and curl up in a ball, or I can figure out if there is a way to help someone else.
Yeah.
And hopefully I can. So how do you define hope?
Wait,
Go ahead. No, I love yes and.
Yes, and you can still curl up in a ball sometimes, because it is overwhelming. You can do both things when you need.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I think I meant permanently.
Yeah.
How do you define hope?
Okay, so I knew you were going to ask this, and I had a collage workshop last night, so I made a little collage. I'm like, what am I going to say? And so I talked about collage as a process, and for me, it's sometimes just having something to ruminate on, like what is hope, and then flip through magazines and see what resonates for me. And what resonated for me were things like, I think this is going to show up backwards. Yeah. But about being together. So community, about resilience and mindset, and, helping each other, making an impact that we all. So to me, a big part of hope is community. It's us taking action, but even better, us joining with others to take action. And I have a couple little sentences that I just want to share because they grabbed me, about embracing neutrality. And shouldn't we always try to be positive? How can I put neutrality into practice? And then further down here, drop the story that pulls us to the past or to the future. And we sometimes get caught up in the story of like, well, my life wasn't supposed to be like this. Like, this is not how it was supposed to go. And stop and ground in the present. What can we do now? How can we feel safe now? How can we support each other now, and not going so far in the future that you have anxiety, or not looking so far back in the past that you're full of regret. And then maybe writing a new story, like, okay, yeah, this wasn't the story I thought I was in for, but there's a new story, and here's where I can feel good, and here's where I can feel hope.
That's beautiful. Where can everyone find you? What are the projects you're working on?
Yeah, so I do some life coaching. I have a 6-week series, a 6-week program called Craft Your Life, where I talk with the person about where they are now. Usually it's someone midlife, woman often, in the middle of a transition. So talking about where you want to go and helping you move in that direction. But each week is paired with a craft activity that kind of gets you out of your thinking mind and into more of your feeling mind and being mind. And then we move forward to work along those goals. And I also have storytelling nights that I regularly hold in the Chicago suburbs. There's the Stories of Life and Love that I'll have the final one this year sometime in the fall, probably in the northern suburbs. And Hot Flashes is my menopause and midlife storytelling show, which is a ton of fun and also brings another taboo subject and says, let's talk about it. Let's learn from each other. Let's connect. That will be taking place September 10th in Skokie. So that's exciting. And people can find me there and at scrappyaffirmations.com, and also on Instagram at Scrappy Affirmations, and then on LinkedIn under my name. My last name is spelled like mold of sky. That seems to be the easiest way for people to remember it. But yeah, Instagram, LinkedIn, and my website. I'm trying to be more offline these days. I'm finding that it's good for my mental health. So my goal is to really have a business built more off of word of mouth than, Twitter or whatever the trending social media is these days. So you and I both spent a lot of years chasing that and being a part of that. And I have like 20 years of being extremely online, and I'm trying to be a little more offline these days.
It's funny. I have found myself doing the very same thing. Is there anything I didn't ask you, Kim, that you wanted to share?
No. I mean, no, this was great. I appreciate it. And ultimately, my points are about community, mindful self-compassion, and art or creativity that helps us heal. And I appreciate you doing this podcast. The only way we really make it through is together and in community. And I think what you're doing is going to create great conversations and wonderful communities as well.
I'm so grateful that you've spent some time here with me and with this new community we're creating. I am grateful for you and for the work you're doing. Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you.
There is power in being witnessed. There is power, as Kim said, in community and in naming the hard things and knowing that other people are making it through. Thank you so much, friends, for spending time with us here on Hope Comes to Visit. If there is something that has resonated or touched you or given you a soft place to land here today, I hope that you will take a few minutes and share it with someone you love. Go ahead and subscribe, and we so look forward to having you back here with us again later this week. Thank you.
Naturally, it's important to thank the people who support and sponsor the podcast. This episode is supported by Chris Dully, a trusted criminal defense attorney and friend of mine here in St. Louis, who believes in second chances and solid representation. Whether you're facing a DWI, felony, or traffic issue, Chris handles your case personally, with clarity, compassion, and over 15 years of experience. When things feel uncertain, it helps to have someone steady in your corner. Call 314-384-4000 or 314-DUI-HELP, or you can visit dullylawfirm.com to schedule your free consultation.